Hello, I'm Peter Taylor and welcome to episode 6 of 24 Lies Per Second, You Just Sunk My Battleship, the film podcast you listen to either because you know one of us or you've taken a very obscure direction on YouTube. Either side of me I have my seaman, Russell Kellaway.
Hello.
And Winter Tyson.
Miss.
And in cinemas this week is Transformers in the Sea, Battleship, and Con Air in Space, Lockout. Our film picks on DVD will be The Darker Than I Thought It Would Be, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and a couple of other things we have seen in the last few weeks. But now on to this week's main release, and something I had such low expectations of, I was actually excited to see. Battleship.
You went from enlisted to an officer faster than anyone in the history of the United States Navy. But I have never, ever seen a man waste himself better than you.
What my daughter sees in you is a great mystery to me. Enjoy these naval exercises, Hopper. They're likely to be your last.
What the heck is that?
Got an unknown surface contact.
Bridge, TO, I've got nothing on the scope.
Let's get a team in the RIP to investigate this thing.
Albert, you're on it.
Copy, sir.
Get out of the water and return to your ship. Sir, my radar's totally down.
Prepare to fire.
Sir, which weapons?
All of them.
Battleship is about the Navy who are on a training exercise in Hawaii and find themselves in the middle of an alien attack. This is a huge cinema event, so we all make sure we saw this one. I'll start with you, Russ. What did you think?
It was rubbish. No, it's my one-word review for the week.
I think I could have predicted that one somehow.
No, I didn't. Do you know what? It was a shame because I've got to admit I didn't have particularly high expectations of Battleship, but it started out quite well. I mean, you've got Taylor Kitsch there, obviously, unfortunately coming off the back of John Carter of Mars, which didn't do very well. And here he is, playing this guy called Alex Hopper, who's kind of set up quite nicely with his brother. They're out getting drunk. He's obviously a bit of a dropout. And there's a really nice kind of comedic opening where there's a whole scenario with a burrito. And I don't know, it was quite nice. It was quite light. It was quite it was funny, which is always good. If this movie is going to be a success for me, it's got to be quite funny because otherwise I don't think it's going to pull me in dramatically. It's got to have something else going on for it. And then for 2 hours after that, 2 whole hours, it just made my brain hurt, if I'm honest with you. And it made me feel old because maybe 15 years ago I'd have enjoyed this film, but I mean I don't even know if I would have. But it's just awful. They crammed so much in. They had a strange attempt to get Americans to like football.
I found that really weird.
I don't know. They then had the Japanese and the Americans coming together to protect Pearl Harbor. They had geriatric naval officers spouting dialogue that's usually reserved for playgrounds. And it was just absolutely preposterous. It made me laugh out loud more than last week's Pirates did, but not in the right way, unfortunately. Yeah. So for me, it was horrific.
You say about the setup there. I didn't like the setup just because the good thing about it is the fact that it did not take itself seriously right from the off, and you knew that. I mean, the setup was he does something stupid to impress girl. His brother's in the Navy. His brother says, "Oh, this girl's the father is the head of the Navy," or something like that. My solution is that you need to join the Navy.
And all of a sudden he's in the Navy.
How bloody ridiculous.
I mean, he has the quickest rise up the naval kind of ladder I've ever seen in my life. He goes from being not in the Navy to being like, he's in charge of weapons or something on like a frigate. He's quite a big deal all of a sudden, and yet still seemingly rubbish. So it's just absolute hokum.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem from Battleships. I mean, the thing that I learnt about the US Navy was that it rewards jackassery in a sort of major way. I mean, the problem is it's not a film; it's an advert. Yeah. I mean, Hasbro are making films to sell their toys, which is fair enough. Universal have placed Rihanna in it because they want to promote one of their products, which is Rihanna, who, even though she's on screen for a lot of the time, it's a really kind of nothing role she's been given. The character
does it well.
There's a lot of fist clenching.
Yeah,
I think the character is Rihanna with short hair in the Navy. That's
with a
about
hat
it.
on.
I mean, this is sort of filmmaking at its most cynical. I mean, the reason they're playing football at the start is because it's the biggest sport in the world and everyone will recognise it.
Yeah,
that's it. It's not because the characters play football, which is perfectly, would be perfectly reasonable. People do play football in America, etc.
Just not in the Navy.
It's, you see,
but I don't just before. But I don't think the Japanese play a lot of American football. And that's who they were playing against.
Well,
so I bet they must have had a decision. Said, look, can we play something we can both play?
I mean, my point with it was, you've got a sport here that is not either America or Japan's, probably even second or third sport. And here they are. Yeah, we all love football, and it's really bad football as well. It's like one man gets the ball, and then he gets kicked in the face by like a Japanese guy, and so gets a penalty. And it's and I don't know. That was one problem for me. Is that I never thought I would be using Transformers as an example of how a film should be made. But because I really like the first Transformers film, I think it's quite good. It's entertaining. It's got big metal robots in it. It does what it says on the tin, and most of all, it's entertaining because it's quite long as well. But this film, it just had none of that, despite basically trying to be the same movie. I know there were aliens and they weren't robots, but they were basically inside robots. Their ships were like Transformers, a lot of kind of moving things going around, and it was just useless for me. It even managed to ruin the music of AC/DC. Oh. By simply hammering it over and over again to shots of naval ships.
But the music's a really big problem in it, because they know it's a shit film. So what they've got to do is prompt you. So at the start of the film, he breaks into a shop, and the Pink Panther music comes on.
It did. It was so blatant.
It's just so
he's being creepy.
It's like they think, these people won't understand what breaking into a shop is.
He's still a good guy. He's still a good guy. He's just breaking and entering.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Let's make this fun because. To be honest, the script's not going to give you any clue about his character. He's just a jerk, to be honest. And he's not very likeable.
No.
At all. He's just a complete jerk all the way through. He doesn't do anything particularly brainy during the film. He doesn't do anything massively heroic.
We're also not told how he gets the girl, other than that burrito stitch. The next scene, they're together and apparently love each other and want to get married.
That was the secret. It just had all these characters in, and every single one of them was underwritten. You had naval veteran who had no legs. He was just this. That's all he was. They might as well have just given them. That might as well have been his name. Black Navy guy with no legs. Yeah, and then you have old Navy guy who's old. That's his name.
And then you have Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson,
who is in there for what I can see as a paycheck.
Liam Neeson,
he's barely
rough voice, naval commander. And all those things. There's no character development there at all. It's just such a shocker. I mean, his brother. Oh, I can't even say it because I want to give it away. Something happens to Taylor Kitsch's brother. Who cares?
Yeah. He's not introduced to
no.
because
there's not even an emotional beat there at all. It just happens, and you're like, oh well, yes, and see you later.
But, no, it's right because it's both staggeringly underwritten and massively overwritten at the same time. There's just it's like a succession of incident. Stuff keeps happening, and depending what scene you're in, stuff will happen differently. And I'm all for when a film says, right, aliens have turned up, let's just assume the rules of physics are a little bit bendy. But let's not lay down a rule in one scene and then just flat out say, no, can't do it. So there's like this electromagnetic pulse thing. We cannot use our communication systems.
That was perfect.
Screw it. In the next scene, someone phones them up on like a mobile or a kid's walkie-talkie or something. It takes the audience for such idiots. It's ridiculous. And it would just go, you know what? That happened 5 minutes ago, so they'll accept that by now.
Since
that's completely
5 minutes,
out the window.
we've shown them quite a lot of pictures of ships, and so they've probably forgotten what's going on. I still actually can't fully understand what happened in the film. I'm not quite sure. I understand that there was some kind of message sent out into space, and the aliens responded to that. But then when they got here, all they seemed to want to do was go away, and I don't know.
And there's this really annoying device in the film whereby the aliens attack people, but then just don't.
Don't
seemingly
kill them.
for slightly different reasons. And I thought, is there going to be some kind of COD sort of predator thing of they won't attack
weaponry,
you? Well, this is it. You're kind of like, well, if you're not directly aiming a gun at my face, you're not a threat.
That's right.
However, you are stood in the communication shed and could wreck everything for our invasion.
That's what irritated me. One of the most things is you thought, these guys are clearly much more intelligent than we are. You'd have thought someone had gone, you're right, mate. These guys, even if they don't have a gun, they'll probably still kill you. So just kill them all. But they didn't do that because they clearly had the power to do that, and that's what irritated.
One of the strange things, it was directed by Peter Berg, and Peter Berg sort of, I'm pretty sure he started off being like a Michael Mann.
This man
protege.
makes good films. Friday Night Lights.
Oh, Friday Night Lights
which is brilliant.
Oscar-worthy film in my
The
opinion.
Kingdom,
It's fantastic.
I love The Kingdom as well. I think it's one of the best kind of Iraq War kind of based films out there. He also made Very Bad Things, back in kind of the late 90s, which is quite a nice little guilty pleasurist type of kind of like a Hangover, previous kind of Hangover made movie really. And so I agree. For him to make this film and to make it in such an empty way is such a surprise.
But I think that he went from making sort of this sort of Michael Mann light to Michael Bay light.
Bay light, yeah.
Is he a director with no actual sort of personal style? Does he just have no sort of defining sort of instincts at all? The thing is, doing this podcast, I find myself going to watch films I would not otherwise go and see.
Yeah.
And Battleship is just a stinker. And it's one of the few times I'm going to say don't go and see it. I've been to see it for a reason, and I feel a bit bad.
It's not even worth going to see for the special effects. It's not even. It just has no redeeming features at all. Like, even if you lived in a place with an IMAX screen, it was showing Battleship. Don't bother. Go and see the one they show about the gorillas or something, because it was better.
And also opening this week at the Mallard is the new Luc Besson-produced Lockout. It stars Guy Pearce as a man framed for a crime he didn't commit, who has to rescue the president's daughter from a space prison if he wants his freedom. And based on the trailer, it looks bloody brilliant. But was it? Winter, as someone who I feel tends to love this kind of B-movie ridiculousness, what do you think?
I loved it. I did. I'm
not surprised.
I can't say anything but. I mean, the thing is, B-movies are just about the most honest films you can get. Because if you look at the trailer for Lockout, you think, do I want to see John Carpenter's Snake Plissken ripoff that takes place on a space prison? Yes. That's exactly what I wanted to see.
For sure.
That's exactly what it got. I mean, it's got some great action in it. The violence crunches along quite nicely. There's some brilliant lines delivered by Guy Pearce, who, I think this is Guy Pearce's forte here.
It's amazing. The fact that he hasn't been in a film like this before is amazing.
The film, it doesn't outstay its welcome at all. I mean, there's a couple of bits near the end where you think, oh, that seems a bit silly, but, so what? Joseph Gilgan, better known from sort of Emmerdale and This Is England and a few other bits and pieces, he goes all out in this one. He was fantastic as sort of one of the main bad guys. I mean, a proper Oldman-style psycho nutter and a really Scots accent going on there. You do
really
wonder
heavy.
how this play. You do wonder if sort of in places like America where they're not used to hearing these kind of voices on telly.
They hate having to think and listen.
I wonder if it's. I'd even wonder if it might be dubbed in America or something.
Because they're not doing that with Brave. I know, Reece, the new Scottish Pixar one that's coming out.
Well, that's it. I mean, this was entirely disposable cinema, and it was brilliant. It was great. It was a good bit of punch in the face. The main guy in it smokes his way through most of the film if he can finish the cigarette before someone punches him in the face a bit more. And brilliant, loved it, absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this yesterday, and I went home afterwards, and I just looked up how much it cost to make. I was interested because there is a section in the beginning, in the first 10 minutes, and it's got some of the worst special effects in it you will ever see. Now, they are
pretty ropey,
seriously awful. After that, it's pretty good. It's all kind of location stuff and it's all kind of practical effects and it's pretty good. But this first bit, I thought, I'll just check how much it cost to make. Now, Battleship cost $200 million, estimated, right, to make Battleship. Lockout cost $30 million, right? And there is no way that they may be bad, but I wouldn't say they're 170 million bad. And I also wouldn't say that Battleship, is 170 million better than Lockout. There's just no comparison. Lockout is such a better movie than it. And they're going for roughly the same target audience. Both feature kind of generic B-movie plots and characters, but Lockout's just fun. While Battleship, as we said, it's just horrific. I mean, I think the thing about it that really makes it, and like you already said, is Guy Pearce is so good, and I wouldn't say that Lockout's characters are really well rounded or anything. They're not amazingly put forward, but they are there. There are characters present. They may be stock characters, but they're rounded out by good performances, which I don't think Battleship is either. And like I said, centered around Guy Pearce, who he's surly, he's cocky, he's funny, he's tough, which I didn't in like not just you've seen Guy Pearce play quite tough roles before, but he's very big. He's put on quite a lot of weight for it. And, and he's dispensing these Bruce Willis die-hard lines, and he's kind of running around and doing all the stuff you'd normally expect him to do. I actually saw today that Guy Pearce has been cast in the new Iron Man film. And so maybe we'll get to see kind of a bit more of this type of role, whether he's going to be a kind of a good guy or a bad guy or a mixture of the two.
I think he's a biologist or something,
Yeah,
so unless he's a
bad.
muscle-bound
I don't know.
biologist. You might...
Hey, he might be. He could be forging a new path. I mean, overall, it does what it's supposed to do. I mean, I sat there for 90 minutes, had a great time, and next week I'll probably have forgotten it. And that's not a problem. But unfortunately, I don't think I'll ever forget Battleship. And so that's kind of the thing. I don't mind forgetting Lockout because it was bright, it was breezy, it was nice to watch. I don't want to talk about Battleship anymore. It's just got in my head. I can't get rid of it.
I know what you mean about like the special effects in Lockout are they're a bit disastrous.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point where there's a weird sort of motorbike. I think
Chase.
it's like a motorbike with one wheel or
Yeah.
something odd. And it's so ropey that you can't actually tell what's going on at one point. And that's not all to do with the fast camera. That's to do with just
The actual muddiness. of it.
terribly blurred
Yeah.
effects.
But the worst thing is, they didn't even need that. That's the strange thing. They didn't need that.
Well, it didn't
little
matter,
bit.
did it?
It's like a chase, and they're chasing. He could have just run away from them, and that would have been more exciting to have him running and doing a bit of jumping, maybe. But yeah, it wasn't good.
But I think the good thing about it, it's sort of genre crunching at its best. They've gone, right, it's a prison movie. We're going to send someone into the prison to break someone out. Right, we need parts A, B, C, and D, and a few laughs. And that's what they did. And it is sort of, on one respect, I suppose it is sort of very mechanical filmmaking. But they've put together a team of people. I mean, Luc Besson's involved in his films. Whether you like his style or not, he usually brings something a bit special to the film. He was involved with Taken as well. And you know what? They've got good actors in there. Peter Stormare is just one of those guys. He's I'm trying to think what he's in blooming everything. He's one of the nihilists in Big Lebowski. He's one of these guys who pops up in
He's the devil in Constantine.
Yeah, he pops up all over the place, and you go, oh, it's him. I know what role he's playing. All right, okay, that's that guy. I've seen him in maybe Doomsday, maybe something else. I don't know. And that's what it does exactly what it says it'll do, and it doesn't fart around doing it. And like I say, it's nice to go and watch a film where someone smokes and people get punched in the face and it looks like it hurts.
100%. And the shame thing is this probably might not be in the Mallard next week, whereas Battleship probably is. So if you want to see it, get and see it now, because you'll miss your chance. And it's a great night out.
First up on DVD and Blu-ray this week is David Fincher's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, or TGWTDT, to make things far easier. I've seen this film only. You two have seen both versions, and have you both read the book?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, Winter.
I haven't read the
book.
book.
Okay,
so one of
just,
us-
I'm the
okay.
completist.
Okay. So, who wants to kick things off with this version?
Okay, completist. I'll tell you what, I'll give you a quick synopsis first. You've got a disgraced Swedish political journalist called Mikael Blomqvist, played by Daniel Craig, and he's contacted by a rich industrialist called Henrik Wanger, played by Christopher Plummer. He asks him for his help with his memoirs. Once Blomqvist moves up to the Wangers' home to start on the book, he finds out the real reason that he's been invited up there is to find the murderer of Wanger's favourite great niece, who disappeared from their family's island in 1966. Along the way, he teams up with Rooney Mara's Lisbeth Salander, who's a young hacker who has a talent for finding information and solving clues. I'm going to stick my neck out. I'm going to say that I prefer both Fincher's version to the original Danish film. For me, it's a darker film, it's a harder film, and I think the characters that kind of Fincher's put in it, they're more faithful to the book, as I remember, as opposed to the Danish version. And to add to that, I'd go even further and say that I even think that Rooney Mara's Lisbeth Salander is better than Noomi Rapace's, which I think, I know a lot of people probably disagree with that. I just think, for me, when reading the book, she's just got she's physically more fragile than kind of Noomi Rapace was for me, and yet she comes across as harder when she has to. So she gets that balance really right for me. And also, I mean, she then surprised me a lot when it turned out to be quite a tender ending to the film as well, which I didn't kind of expect, especially from David Fincher. He's kind of, when you watch the film, it comes to the end, and it's quite a surprising kind of last few kind of minutes, last kind of final shot to it. I really like it. I mean, I'm a big fan of David Fincher anyway. He always seems to. He even brought out The Darkness in Facebook, which is quite an impressive thing to do. But yeah, for me, I thought it's populated by some brilliant performances. Christopher Plummer, and I thought Daniel Craig was one of his best as well. Kind of almost playing along, kind of being the character in the background.
He didn't have to do too much,
doesn't do very much, but I think if you get it wrong, it would be terrible. And yeah, so I mean, from my point of view, it's top of the pile in terms of this adaptation. I'm not sure if they're going on to make the other two. I'm not sure if it will happen.
Heard that they might. Fincher probably won't.
But they might, which might not be a good thing, especially because I think a lot of the reasons why I like it is because of kind of Fincher's input on it. But I think it works as a standalone film. I don't think you need the other two. And so yeah, I like it a lot.
I'm going to be blunt and say I don't like it. I mean, Fincher definitely brings sort of a cinematic quality to something that I think was originally like a TV, an extended
the second
TV
two
movie
films,
sort of thing.
and the Danish versions were TV movies.
There's a bit of flatness to them, Fincher's film, as ever, looks really nice. It looks brilliant.
Yeah.
But my problem with this whole thing is that it's a really nasty, tacky little film masquerading as quality cinema. Because Fincher's directing it, it's got this quality tag to it. If it's going to be if you're going to make a down and dirty film, make it down and dirty. Don't try and polish it out and you fill it up with your Christopher Plummer, your Stellan Skarsgård, and annoyingly, which the cast list is a spoiler. I'm just going to say that out. It's one of those films. The cast is a spoiler, and where I don't know if Max van Sydow was on holiday that week or something, but anyway. My problem with it is it's just really naff. I mean, Elizabeth Salander is a bisexual punk computer hacker. A 12-year-old could come up with a better character than that. I'm sorry, I think it's just terrible. And since when did using rape as a lesson? Since when was that anything but just reprehensible? I don't care I heard a lot of stuff of, well, he did it first, and it's an important character point. No, I'm sorry. It's not legitimate at all to use rape as a lesson in a way in which you make the audience go, good. Yeah, that's good. That's some good rape happening there. I'm sorry. And I know it's a bit, I know I can sound I find myself thinking, am I being a bit too sort of precious about this type of stuff? And then I think, well, no, because if the tables were turned and she'd done it to him first, and then he raped her back. Seriously, would that film have any? Would it have any credibility?
I don't know if that's a valid point because I don't know. I'm not saying that you're not right in terms of the use of the rape in the actual way it works in the film, but I don't think to say how would that film play out if she raped him first, because that wouldn't happen. Because
no, but if he was the vulnerable character,
yes.
But it's showing that she's not that vulnerable. That's the point in that, because basically it opens that Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara, that they're not together at first, and it takes them a long time to meet. So all I can see is the point in the first bit is essentially establishing their characters, because there's not much storyline that moves along at that point. And that, as far as I could see, was to establish that yes, she's vulnerable, but she's also insane.
But I don't think the insanity comes off though.
Okay,
this is my problem with it. I think
if someone did that to me, I wouldn't consider them sane.
One of the reasons I was looking forward to Fincher's version was I thought they might tone down some of the aspects that just go too far in the sort of original, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but they didn't. What they did was they just showed that this kind of filmmaking is just as dumb and reprehensible, no matter what language it's in. I don't know. I think it's trying to be legitimate when it's really not.
Because to me, that comes across as a really dark plot device. Maybe it didn't need to be as dark, but just because that scene was in it, that ruined the whole thing for you. Because I thought the rest of it was just, as someone coming on watching the first film, I thought the whole thing was thoroughly entertaining.
I mean, I think that the book's quite interesting because, I mean, one thing that you don't maybe necessarily get a flavour of in both films, really, the book is very strongly coded towards talking about attacks on the feminine body and about kind of female violence. But at the start of most of the chapters, it talks about numbers of women who've been killed in Denmark, and so it has got that background. And so I suppose if you were going to justify that level of rape on rape, as you were, there might be a case for it in there, in that the actual book in itself, like I say, it's very left-wing, and it is kind of trying to explore those themes throughout it in that certain way. And so I suppose, there could be a rationale for it there. in terms of it being a reason for him writing that, and therefore obviously the film's portraying it. It is much darker in Fincher's version than it is in the Danish version. I'd put that down to Fincher, to be honest with you. I think he's quite a dark guy. You know, most of his films have been in the past. I mean, I don't know. I haven't got a problem with her having had what happened to her with her really horrible and nasty psychiatrist, with her playing out that fantasy on fantasy is an interesting word anyway, but on film, her revenge almost kind of ticks your boxes as an audience member, and if you get pulled into that, then that opens up the whole debate about what are you watching and how do you feel about watching it, and are you complicit in her actions for kind of enjoying it? And I personally like that whole debate and enjoy kind of participating in it and kind of being active in it. So I suppose that's why I don't have a problem with it. I mean, I'm the same as Pete in terms of that. For me, is a part of the film that just feeds into the whole quite good quality, cracking thriller aspect of it.
It also comes into it later, so it's a reason why she takes the case. It's a reason why when they find out all these other things, why she's so close to it. I honestly just think it's a plot device that they also wanted to put in there for shock value.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Well, see, that's the thing, and if you're going to do shock value, make a shocking film.
Yeah,
I think part of the problem is, and I know I find myself feeling that I'm sounding a bit precious about this stuff sometimes, and I just think, every police show you see on telly, 99% of the time there's a dead, eviscerated woman, or a woman being battered or raped or something, and I don't know why there just comes a point when I just think, come on, let's have a different story. And I know that's not their fault, because their story just happens to be the same as everyone else's. But it just seems there's a constant churn of dead and battered women across our screens. And I don't know. And if it's not, and I think because of that, if you're not honest about what you're doing in a film, and if you do play this side game, well, this is highbrow entertainment, therefore violent. I can be more violent because I'm being highbrow. I think that's what I didn't like about it. I think there's a certain snootiness here, whereas I don't doubt for a moment that a lot of the people who like Dragon Tattoo would probably look at something like Saw and say, "Oh, that's a shame," when there's quite a lot of similarity between them, and it's playing the same game. But especially with those two really drawn out scenes, the second of which did not need to be there to make that character point. I don't think it needed to go as far as it did in terms of her actions, not just in the showing of it. I think it's a false character point anyway. And I think if you're going to say, I think the original title of the book was Men Who Hate Women or something.
Right. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And if you're going to be making those kind of points, I'm sorry, but you can't be a hypocrite about it. And I just found it slightly hypocritical. And I've got to say, it's really well acted.
Yep.
It looks fantastic. In a way, it's nice to see that amount of money being spent on a very adult story as well.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's an honest film.
What about you, Pete?
I really liked it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like I personally, I liked it as well. I mean, I'm the same as you. I mean, it's a good thriller. Like Winter says, be prepared for some relatively hard. It's an 18. It's a proper 18. It's got some hard violence in there. If you don't maybe sit down and watch it with your mum and dad potentially, or your nan, depending on how she feels about hardcore sexual violence.
I know mine loves it.
No, but I liked it as well. I'd recommend one to get on DVD definitely.
Yeah. Next up, we all rewatched. Well, two of us rewatched, and one of us had seen it previously. Battle Royale.
How dare you even mention
that? But is it as brutal as we remember? And interestingly, how does it compare to the Hunger Games? Anyone? I thought it was 20 times better than the Hunger Games on rewatching it, and I realised how similar the Hunger Games was. I reckon whoever made the Hunger Games looked at and went back and said, right, this story is almost exactly the same as Battle Royale. I'm going to watch it and basically try and do the same thing.
Yeah, that's a very interesting opinion there. I like your.
Well, it's just
your
how it
honesty.
started. I mean, I know you need a sort of titles to start it, but it was exactly the same. There was this is a dystopian future where people get sent to battle, and it's exactly the same as the Hunger Games. It's set up very similarly, and then it just gets into it. But I just thought this was far superior.
I think it's almost the Hunger Games with depth.
Yeah.
Because you have, is it Takeshi Miike who's in it? Yeah, it is, isn't it? And he's the guy who's going to organise it. He's got a real story arc there, and he kind of starts and he's very strong.
You get to know the characters in the battle, not beforehand.
Yeah, and then he crumbles, and I mean, it's a really interesting film, and obviously when it came out, it was that real kind of controversial film with all the violence and all the children stuff. And I don't know, it's violent, but I mean, I suppose Japanese people probably don't think it's that violent because compared to a lot of the stuff they put out, it's actually relatively tame. In terms of that.
It was less violent than I remember it.
Yeah,
less gory, rather.
Yeah, I think so.
Less realistic gore.
Yeah.
Which I think was a point. I think they specifically didn't go for realistic gore because it was a plot device.
Well, I think that's also more of a style. I think that's more of a Japanese style.
Yeah.
You look at things like Kill Bill that have been influenced by that kind of cinema, and it's that same kind of thing. So I think that's more of a cultural kind of aesthetic thing that they go for. I mean, I love Battle Royale. I mean, I was left a little bit cold by the Hunger Games. I'm not quite sure. I mean, the comparison itself troubles me a bit between the two of them because they're obviously sharing a certain amount of kind of universe, but I'm not sure if it has. I'm not as sure as you, Pete, as to how close they are. And so I would never say I like one more than the other because they're linked. I was fairly middling over Hunger Games. I really like Battle Royale, but that's not a linked kind of a judgment on it.
Yeah, no, I really like Battle Royale, and one of the things that struck me when I was rewatching it was just how sort of punky it is. I mean, it's such a great piece of exploitation cinema. It's a bunch of kids put on an island. Some of them got machine guns and shotguns. Some of them have got paper fans, and they battle to the death. And it's brilliant. It works really well. It's still a very shocking film, I think, just because the very concept is quite horrible. I think though. I don't think it's the Hunger Games with depth because there's not really that much depth to Battle Royale, and there's been a lot of hoo-ha on the internet about this. Hunger Games is such a rip-off of every other story ever told, and so's Battle Royale, and I think the thing is with Battle Royale, it's so over the top. It does exactly what Hunger Games does in that it's not realistic violence at all, like you said, Pete, and when you notice when the guns are going off, they strobe red when people get hit with bullets.
Yeah.
And all
people barely get hit. That Uzi, I think they die after 200 rounds or something.
Yeah. But it's just so full of energy and action, and it kind of, it looks a little kind of cheap and schlocky, and kind of like is roughed up over a period of a couple of weeks. And I also beat Takeshi's in it, and he's just fantastic. I mean, he's always fantastic in films, but I just don't see the connection between the Hunger Games and Battle Royale past the concept of children having to fight each other. I think they're about very different things. I think I'd probably recommend Battle Royale to more people than I would recommend the Hunger Games, simply because as a sort of slap you in the face bit of cinema, it's brilliant. But and it's something you'll remember. Whereas the Hunger Games, as good as I think it is, I think it's a very solid film. It would have to take your interest. I think you've got to be of that kind of. You've got to like that kind of very 70s style sort of sci-fi.
Well, you see, I wonder. Like, so that I had quite a middling response to Hunger Games, and I wonder if Battle Royale is part of the reason for that. Because I like Battle Royale, and like you say, it is a film where they give kids loads of weapons and they just go and kill each other, which I really enjoyed and is really great. But in the Hunger Games, they give kids loads of weapons, and you don't really go out and kill everyone. They kind of walk around the forest for a bit, then someone might die. Then they walk around the forest a bit more. They do a bit of talking, and like I say, as much as it was okay, it was fine. It wasn't what I wanted it to be, which I suppose is quite a dirty thing to say. But Battle Royale 2 or so, like a remake of in a way, which obviously wasn't. And maybe it's always difficult when you take perceptions in to watch a film because you go, that's where you often let down. And I wonder if that's kind of what happened with this. I was expecting it to be like Battle Royale. I don't know whether the book is any more.
Well, that's what interesting point for me is. I was watching Battle Royale, I think yesterday, and I just thought, wow, this is making me feel like the book of the Hunger Games did. Where what would I do if I'm in here? Whereas the film of the Hunger Games, I didn't have that reaction at all, and that's why I thought this has done the book so much better than the Hunger Games did the book. Which
right,
is,
okay.
I mean, as you say, the comparisons aren't all there, but there are some, and I think there are enough to make this film much better. Because that's what I was looking for from this. Because that's the way the book made me feel.
Yeah.
As much as I empathise with Katniss, whatever, I was putting myself in her position, which I just didn't do in the film.
But I mean, the Battle Royale is also a much simpler film in that it doesn't play that hot. It doesn't do the reality TV thing because it's not broadcast. Which I think when you read a lot of people moaning about the Hunger Games, people seem to forget Battle Royale isn't a TV show.
Yeah,
like the Hunger Games.
It's just something that happens every year, to almost like a cull, isn't it? You know, basically.
So it can go, and I think that's kind of good because it lets you off morally in that because you're not judging the people watching. You get to watch. Whereas what was quite neat about the Hunger Games was it couldn't go for that exhilarating
you're
violence.
Be disgusted by the people watching it,
because then you wouldn't have that sort of the difference to the people watching it. But yeah, I mean, one of the nice things about Battle Royale is watching it. I mean, it must be 5 or 6 years since the last time I saw it. It's just so much fun. It's one of those films you think, you know what? If they were to do sort of a series of films and someone would come up to me and say, look, we're going to give you a cinema for a week. You get one film per night. Battle Royale would be one of them just for the sheer hell of it because it's a fantastically well-made exploitation film.
And finally, we have the part of the show where we get to mention anything we've seen in the last week that's worth talking about. So, Winter, anything?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. First of all is Friends with Benefits, which is Justin Timberlake and Mila Kunis in a romantic comedy where they agree to be sex buddies with no attachments, but will they get together by the end? Won't they? Who knows? Just have a guess.
Spoil it for you.
It's a surprisingly decent film, and it's cynical enough to get away with sort of having its cake and eating it. And if you've seen Dear John, Richard Jenkins is in both of these films, weirdly playing exactly the same role. Like you could flip those two characters together, but Richard Jenkins in any film is a bonus. And Timberlake, I gotta say, he's starting to become someone who you'll see on the front of a video cover and think, yeah, I watch that. Timberlake's in it. He's pretty good. Secondly, out, I think, this week on DVD is Mark Cousins' epic sort of 15-hour documentary story of film, which is all about cinema and all about cinema from all over the world. A lot of people there seems to be a split on this, I think it depends whether you find Mark Cousins and his particular point of view.
Unbelievably annoying. I mean,
exactly.
Peter's not going to enjoy it.
I know. I've been watching the series and I love it. Well, but it's very hard to get past because his voice, it just sounds so pretentious and. But I thoroughly recommend it, even if he's that annoying.
I think if you want to discover some world cinema, if you want to hear about some stuff you wouldn't have heard before, and if you want to
do that in 10 hours, then it's perfect.
And if you just want to sort of delve into someone who's got a very particular point of view about what cinema should be and is, and so on and so forth, I highly recommend it. And finally, on the 25th of April, a local film called Zombie is being put onto YouTube for anyone to watch for free. It's about half an hour long. It's a zombie film. As part of the Sarnia Shorts thing that I'm involved in, we screened it at the Performing Arts Centre just before Christmas. Since then, I believe the sound's been sorted out properly. Some of the editing's been tightened up. Some of the final bits and pieces have been sort of bolted onto it. So I could highly recommend that. That's Zombie, Zombey.
Okay, and this week I caught Bad Lieutenant, which is not Bad Lieutenant. What's the new one? Port of Call?
New Orleans, to give it its full title.
I watched the original, which is one of the most depressing films I've ever seen.
Troubling.
I didn't feel happy after it. It's Harvey Keitel, and he's a cop who basically, he's a lieutenant who steals, takes loads of drugs.
Masturbates in public.
And all sorts of things. Arrests people for no and that sounds really fun, but it's actually not that fun. I imagine the Nick Cage version is a lot more fun and idolizes that, but this just shows it in such a horrible light and in just showing this guy go to complete excess in every way, and he just constantly looks drained, and you just feel ugh.
It is a classic.
Film of the week.
We should say.
I think we end on a note about some kind of discussion.
Last week was Snowtown. With personally, it is a great film. I think it's worth a watch. It's just quite a difficult one. Like you said, a phenomenal phenomenal performance by Harvey Keitel and a cracking bit of directing by Abel Ferreira. You know, it is great.
Next time, we will be reviewing what I consider the first huge blockbuster this year, The Avengers, or to call it by its British title, Avengers Assemble. Why? Which is the last time I will be referring it to as that, as it just reminds me of Ron Burgundy. And that is out the Mallard. Is it next week as well?
Yeah.
And as well as that, we have Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, which is out on DVD, I believe. So I think you two have both seen that.
Yep,
and
saw that
I
at
will
Christmas.
catch up with that at some point. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and remember to like our Facebook page, Guernsey Film Info. Bye.